Hey, everybody. This is Deb. I'm here with 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵𝗲𝗀 of the EQRP company. Matthew is a premier provider of self-directed accounts, providing unmatched support in a whole community of other EQRP customers that talk to each other and can share information and deals. And I have been a member of EQRP for just under 2 years now. And I also have a self-directed IRA, but I moved some of my money from my self-directed IRA to my new EQRP because there's more flexibility with EQRP, less paperwork, more timely transactions. So I found that there's a really good place for me as a real estate investor and someone that's trying to diversify to have an EQRP account because they can do things that other account types can't do. So with that, I'm going to let Matthew explain what the EQRP is and what it can do for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Deb. I'm excited to share a little bit more about self-directed accounts, the EQRP system. And so I will go ahead and just dive into it. I'll jump into a presentation um, and then we will go for it here. So let me do this here. And so first things first that I like to get into is why would somebody want to use a self-directed account? First thing really always comes back to liquidity. So again, I'll even zoom out a little bit here. So, really the reason for even having a self-directed plan is so that you can take some of your investments that are in the traditional market. So think of your normal 401k or IRA. The greatest amount of diversification that you can get is basically, you pick your mutual fund, maybe you can do bonds. And if you're lucky, you can pick single stocks. But for the most part, inside of an IRA or a 401k, you pick your index fund or your mutual fund, and then you just let it sit for 30, 40 years until you're ready to retire.
Mhm.
Self-directed account, why you would want to choose one is really that you are kind of sick and tired of the traditional market and you want to invest your retirement account, again, whether it's an old 401k, an IRA, or some other type of retirement account, and put it into what we'd call like an alternative asset class, or maybe a more performing asset class, like commercial real estate, even precious metals, cryptocurrency, anything that is just outside of the traditional markets. Coined the alternative investment you could use with a
Mhm.
self-directed account. And so that to say, really the number one reason that we've seen, maybe not the number one, but one of the number one reasons that somebody would pick a self-directed account is for liquidity. Say you are already familiar with alternative investments. Maybe you've got, a short-term rental, you've got an Airbnb, you've invested in self-storage before, you've done something like that. So you're familiar with this concept, but maybe you're listening and a deal has, come across your radar that you're interested in, you're ready to pull the trigger, but you don't quite have the funds that you feel comfortable putting up. You don't want to be cash poor, totally get it. And that's one of the greatest advantages of using a self-directed account is you may have, a couple $100,000 sitting in an old 401k with an old employer doing absolutely nothing for you that you can then roll over into an EQRP plan, get that liquidity, invest in alternative assets. And all the other ones really kind of flow from that one. So obviously diversification, like I just mentioned, your asset classes, if you will, just um, open up significantly inside of a self-directed plan. Whereas again, you're just limited to the traditional capital markets in a standard plan inside of a self-directed account. Um, Really, you can invest in nearly every asset class. There's just a couple that you can't, which I'll get into later. But in large part, you can
Yeah.
invest in just about anything. And so, again, you get control, just like Deb said. I thought she brought up a really good point there, and I'm going to get into this next. But there are two main types of self-directed accounts. The EQRP 401k is basically our flagship product, giving you all the control that you're looking for. So no middleman, no custodian in between that has to
Yeah.
sign off on the paperwork, like she mentioned. And so you get all that control that you're looking for. Again, potential for a higher return, just depending on the alternative asset class. And then tax advantage growth. I always like to come back to that. Some people think um, maybe they fast track a little bit too much in their mind and they think, oh, if I do this, I'm going to trigger a taxable event, right? Thankfully, you don't. Moving from your traditional IRA to a EQRP 401k, doing that movement of money is a non-taxable event. It's called a direct rollover. So, no taxes or penalties there. And then obviously, you get to continue to assume the growth, whether you rolled over, a Roth portion of your company 401k or a traditional IRA. you can have both pre-tax and Roth funds inside of the EQRP vehicle. And so,
And I've done that with both of mine. So, and I
oh, great.
can't tell you how happy I was that you guys moved all that money for me because it's, there's a lot of paperwork and account numbers and titling to be done and where to send checks and wires and all that stuff. And it was really advantageous to have somebody at EQRP just be on the phone and tell everybody what needed to be done and who's going to do what.
Yeah.
So it made it really, really streamlined, and it was very quick because you guys did it right the first time instead of having
Mhm.
me try to do it and mess it up.
Yep. That's so funny. And that's another point too about just our process is we have account managers for all of our members is what we call our clients. Just so you don't have to worry about calling a 1-800 number and getting turned around to 6 or 8 different people, getting a different answer every
Yeah,
time. Like that's a part of it is just having that one-on-one relationship
yeah,
for you. So thank you for sharing. That's great. So I'll spend a little bit of time here because I think this is where there's the word that comes to mind is confusion. I actually don't think that's really what it is. I think maybe it's a lack of awareness or education around um, both types of self-directed accounts. So, and Deb, you're a perfect example. I actually just used what you shared earlier. So she has, or she had and still has a self-directed IRA vehicle. And so we'll start with that. Again, there's too many types of self-directed plans. The most well-known is that self-directed IRA. I think the reason that they are the most well known is because they are open to anybody with earned income. You don't have to be self-employed. What you do for work, how much you earn outside of a Roth IRA, anybody can really have a self-directed IRA. At least it's a traditional IRA. There are income limits with a Roth IRA, but that's another conversation for another day. Um,
yeah,
and so, in the self-directed IRA piece, again, and I'll say this: both plans allow you to do the same thing at the end of the day, which is you can access old retirement accounts or make new contributions to a self-directed account, which you then invest into again those alternative asset classes, whether it's syndication, private equity, you name it. You have those options inside of both accounts. I like to preface with that at the end of the day, they do the same thing, but in our opinion, the solo 401k option, we call that the EQRP 401k. It is the premier vehicle for some of the features that Deb already mentioned that I'll continue to elaborate on is the contribution limit, as you can see, is literally 10x this year of what an IRA is. Inside of the solo 401k, you can have, again, one solo 401k with just like Deb has, you can have pre-tax and Roth money in one account, which is super ideal. That provides account consolidation. You don't have to pay fees for 2 accounts. You're just paying fees for 1 account. You can also take a personal loan from a solo 401k. So depending on your account value, you can get, 50 grand or less in a personal loan in a day, just as instant liquidity that, of course, you do have to pay back to the retirement account, but it's a great way to get access to cash. And so just with some of those features, and then last thing that is probably the biggest highlight that Deb brought up is the self-directed IRA. You are required to have a custodian manage the account. When I say custodian, just think of anybody that has a normal IRA or 401k. Think Fidelity, Charles Schwab. They're your middleman.
yeah.
They're holding all the funds, and you can't do anything unless you go through them. On the solo 401k side, you as the account holder, at least the way that we structure these, and this is the same for all solo 401k plans, is you become the trustee of the account, giving you transactional authority, powers over the plan. And so you're the one-stop shop when it comes to making transactions, approving transactions, everything like that. Where we fall into play on the EQRP side is that account manager feature, like I talked about before. So if I'll again, use Deb's scenario for the rollover. That's where we come in. We'll handle all of those details. If Deb were ever considering an investment that she's not sure she can do, maybe it's disqualified, maybe it's not, she's just trying to figure it all out. She's not in the day-to-day like we are. She can ask that question to us and we can walk her through those details to then give her the ability to pull the trigger on something that she's ready for. So we try to meet the best of both worlds of we're going to give you all the support you want, but not take the control piece with you at the same time. So,
Yeah.
yep. So that's the overview of both of those accounts there. I touched on this earlier, and I'll continue to get into it. Is inside of both accounts. So, and for most of this presentation, I'll just be talking about both self-directed accounts, because I actually should go back here just to again say, to qualify for the solo 401k, there is one caveat, which is that you have to be self-employed in some capacity. It does not have to be your primary form of income. If you have a side gig and you're getting some self-employed income, again, it doesn't have to be your primary vehicle, but you have to do something in order to qualify for that solo 401k. And again, self-directed IRA, that's probably more well known because not everybody's self-employed or doing some kind of side gig, and so they can opt for that if they don't meet that qualifier of being self-employed or a business owner of some capacity.
So does that, Matthew, come
Mhm.
down to the passive versus active income?
Mhm.
And can you give an
Yes,
example of like what's passive and what's active so that people know what active income could be considered
yeah,
versus
it's
passive?
great question. It's funny you say that. I'm smiling about like passive versus active, because I think people know they get into this, that passive income is not always passive. It feels like a lot of work, or it can feel like a lot of work. But to me, and this is coming from somebody who's a non-CPA, I'm not a financial advisor, but the easiest way to see it on paper is look at last year's tax return. And if you're reporting Schedule C income reflects self-employed income. Schedule E income, again, not a CPA here, but I want to say Schedule E is like rental income from real estate properties, and that is generally classified as passive income. So to give that a real life example, if you're somebody who's listening to this and you see this $70,000 figure is really appealing, go look at your tax return. If the majority of what am I trying to say? If your Schedule C income is pretty high, then that's what you're eligible to contribute. You can contribute Schedule C. You cannot contribute Schedule E to a plan like this. And so to go back to your question, Deb, I would say look at a tax return, Schedule E or Schedule C. If it's E, it's passive, and then Schedule C is active self-employed income.
Okay.
Yep. So moving
It's
on
interesting
to,
because I would think being a landlord owning real estate is really not passive because I've been there. I used
agreed,
to be a landlord for many, many years, and it's not passive. That's why you get a property manager.
agreed. And that's why it made me smile, is there, even with, we'll probably end up getting here later, but if we don't, I'll touch on it now. So even if you, if you want to use your retirement account to invest in, let's say you want to buy a single family home and Airbnb it, or even do a long-term rental. It doesn't matter what you do with it, but you buy a single family home. In order to remain qualified, once you make that purchase, is all of the work on the property has to be done by a contractor or a third party. Basically, you can't put in sweat equity, is what I'd call it. So you can't go do the plumbing, you can't do the lights. You got to pay somebody to do it. So it's funny because it can be, in some cases, okay, now I've got to call an electrician. I've got to figure out when he can come out, and then I've got to set up payment. Now I've got to call the plumber. And so you just have all these things to do that, like you said,
Yeah.
don't feel passive. So, but anyway, um, on to the tax side, which I won't spend a lot of time here because I think a lot of people are familiar with these concepts. So,
Hmm.
tax deferred growth, that when I think tax deferred, I just think of your traditional 401k that most people think about when they think of 401k is, from my salary, I'm going to defer, 3%, 5%, whatever it ends up being, that I am not going to pay tax on now. I'll pay tax later once I hit retirement age. So you can do that same type of tax deferred growth, again, really just referred to in this industry as a traditional account. So you can do that inside of an EQRP vehicle or both self-directed accounts, is have pre-tax money that it's growing tax deferred up until retirement. Once you pull the money out, you pay taxes at that point. The tax-free option, which is more commonly known as Roth, you can do in either plan, again, self-directed IRA or the EQRP 401k. You pay taxes now, and then everything grows tax-free for life. Once you withdraw at retirement age, you're not going to pay taxes on that. So the nice thing is you still have those strategies inside of both of these accounts. You can either reduce your taxable income in a year if you wanted to contribute. Say you are self-employed and you're a high earner, you want to max out, you want to contribute 70 grand in traditional, using the traditional method, the pre-tax dollars. You'll lower your gross income that year, could potentially change your tax bracket, which is helpful, and then you just pay that later on. Or again, you could take the hit now and then just know that once you're over age 59 and a half, you can withdraw that with no issues and you're smooth sailing. So
Yep.
those are great features. Last thing I'll mention here is this does specifically apply to the EQRP 401k or the solo 401k. It does not apply to the IRA. But if you invest in an asset where there is debt leverage, so I like to just say like multifamily is a good example, like a multifamily syndication, say it's 50% loan to value, the whole deal is. If you as the investor put up $100,000 and the asset's 50% leveraged, your investment, so $50,000, can be subject to what's called unrelated business income tax. They call it UBIT, which I'm not going to get into the logistics of that because it can be
Yeah.
a little bit. It's a tiered tax, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's like, it starts at 25%, goes up to 37%, depending on how much income you're receiving in that particular year. So anyway, play out both of those scenarios. With the self-directed IRA, you could pay UBIT tax on that investment. Inside of the solo 401k, you invest in that multifamily project as an example, you're in good standing because that UDFI, so the debt finance portion does not incur UBIT tax on the solo 401k. I know that part's a little bit wonky, but I think it's good to know for an investor who especially wants to get involved in real estate with their retirement accounts.
Exactly. Because you don't want to pay taxes if you don't have to. I think we're all trying to avoid the same thing.
Yep. That's a good point too. I think a lot of people will sign up for a self-directed IRA not knowing that could happen to them. They're wanting to use retirement funds that are tax deferred, and then all of a sudden you're in a multifamily syndication and you get this, basically a bill. You got some tax to owe out of your retirement account, which is no fun. So I put together just a quick little chart here. I thought it'd be a good visual. So for both plans, really anybody with earned income can take this route. This is more designed for the self-employed individual. Contribution limit, yes, it is 10x. Again, that is specific to self-employed income. You can't just contribute money from a savings account. It has to come from that particular bucket of money. The good news is both accounts, a Roth option is available. You can take a personal loan out of the solo 401k. You can't out of the IRA. And then again, that UDFI example that we just touched on. So I'll keep going here. I thought an example could help. And Deb, stop me at any point if you have a question or anything you want to throw out there. But just to walk through a couple of scenarios here. So the first one, investor A, they are just stuck in the market. This is, typical, I guess, American worker, frankly. Most people are just kind of, the phrase that comes to mind is set it and forget it. I feel like I learned that from Dave Ramsey when I was in high school. Just go ahead and throw it in your 401k and let it grow and don't touch it until you're in your 60s. And so investor A, they are just capped at that employee contribution in their 401k of $23,500, only limited to mutual funds and stocks, no access to alternative investments. That's A-okay for somebody who just wants to do that route. They don't want to have any involvement and, they're hoping for the best with their account. That is an option. But for the sake of this call, I know most of you would be interested in actually taking control of the cash in some capacity. And so again, investor B here, using a solo 401k as a business owner. I like this illustration because it shows that you can still contribute the $23,500 as the employee, and then to make up that $70,000 number, the $46,500 is the employer contribution, also known as profit sharing, to make up a total of $70,000 that you can contribute. Again, inside of the solo 401k, go invest in real estate, private equity, metals. Best part is you are eliminating UBIT tax on debt leveraged assets, and you have the Roth provisions as well with inside of the one account. And then lastly, with that self-directed IRA, you can contribute $7,000 a year. So maybe you could do that again as Roth, which wouldn't lower your taxable income, or you could do pre-tax, lowering your taxable income. Roll over your old retirement account. You worked for an employer for 10 years, your 401ks at that point reached a solid, nest egg there. You can roll that over to have some cash to work with, and then invest in again some real estate syndications, doing private lending. On that note, private lending is a wonderful thing to do inside of a self-directed vehicle. I've seen that catch a lot of steam because depending on what you're doing, most syndications, at least that I've seen, a lot of them have $50,000 minimum or a $100,000 minimum, which can be pretty hefty, depending on how much you have available to you in your
Yeah.
retirement account. Nice thing about private lending, depending on how the deal's structured, you could get started I've seen people get started at, $10,000, $15,000. So it's a
Yeah.
great, maybe lower barrier to entry into this type
Yeah.
of investing.
Yeah. I use my my solo 401k for private money lending.
That's perfect. And
Yeah.
another point on that too is I'm sure it's nice from the transaction standpoint. You don't have that middleman, so I'm sure that it's easy for you to be able to go back and
Yeah.
forth and make. Yeah.
Yeah, it's much less paperwork on a much shorter window, to get funds wired to where they need to go. So because
Hmm.
you're in control, as like you said, you're the trustee, so you don't have to run it by the other trustee they check your paperwork, you have the right documents, the right signatures, and then you're going to get approval from them. Then you can wire your funds to
Yep.
wherever they're supposed to be going, but that can take several days. So I found that definitely using the solo 401k is much more efficient as far as that goes.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said. And so I'll jump into this a little bit too, just to help maybe um, yeah, I guess help somebody get started on what you can do inside of a self-directed vehicle. I know that at least for me, when I first got into this, industry, I was excited about the idea of, oh, I can actually invest outside of the stock market, but like, where do I go? How do I get started? So,
Hmm.
in what is even out there? And so, this is not a conclusive list by any stretch, but it's a good way to get started. And we've touched on them briefly. Obviously, we just hit on private lending there, but you can invest in private equity. That can be really appealing. Precious metals, they can be a great, just, I feel like that asset is tried and true to just be a good hedge. Sure, it's not going to get you, a 30% return year after year, but it's a great way to hedge your portfolio
Hmm.
against some risk. Cryptocurrency, if that's your thing, that's your thing. Good for you. I still can't wrap my head fully around crypto. I wish I could. I wish I was that smart. Um, but anyway, that's an option. And then, venture capital is a great opportunity as well.
Yeah.
Getting in on early startup companies, and then you can do something like venture capital, hedge with some metals, do some private lending. And again, you can blend all of these into one pot that is, your retirement account.
Yeah. I mean, it
And
really makes
so,
for a diverse portfolio just in one account. You don't have to go have all different accounts because you want to invest in assets that are restricted in your self-directed IRA, for example. So
yeah,
the EQRP lets you do, both. You can do everything you can do in the self-directed IRA, except more streamlined.
yeah, absolutely. Well, great. I'll just go to this FAQ page to, we've done enough of these to know, some of the questions that we'll always get. I just like to address those for anybody that's watching this as a recording. And if you have some things in mind you want to go ahead and get addressed, I'd love to do it now. And then the next slide will be a way to book a call with us, just a consultation call to talk through what it could look like for you specifically. One of the questions that we get a lot is, hey, can I roll over my 401k and do a self-directed account? And by existing, we mean, I currently work for XYZ company. Can I move that 401k over into a self-directed account? Um, to be honest, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you cannot. Um, Usually, if you're able to roll it over, you're usually over age 59 and a half. You've reached retirement age. In that case, sometimes the employer will let you. If you wanted to get clarification, you can ask your HR department or the custodian who holds the plan, like a Fidelity or a Charles Schwab. Say, can I do an in-service rollover? That's the terminology there. You can ask. Worst they can say is no. Um, so I always tell people, do ask. You'll find out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And then getting into our fees. So our fees are different than probably what you're used to, especially if you've never self-directed before. Um, on our side, we do everything on flat fee structure. So there's one setup fee and then one fee each year. So we don't do transaction fees. We don't take a percentage out of the account, nothing like that. Um, right now, we have been in a special actually where our setup fee is $1,995, and then our annual fee is $895 a year. And so those are our fees. That includes, again, transactions, our support, everything comes into those fees. Um,
And it's well worth it. Let me tell you, if you have, like I did, I had my Roth 401k plus my regular 401k at a previous employer, and I had money in my self-directed IRA that I wanted to move over. So all three of those accounts, you guys helped me get that money out of there and put into the EQRP. And if I had done it myself, it probably would have taken 3 times as long and probably would have
Yeah.
not been done properly. So I found
Yeah.
it to be worth every dime because it would have
Yeah.
taken me much longer to even
To
just
do
to
it by
figure
yourself.
out what to do, what forms go to who, and yeah.
Oh yeah. To do it by yourself can be arduous because
Yeah.
the
Because
the
everybody's
custodians.
just so busy, so.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, well, yeah, and then the next question there, just are there any restrictions? I know that's obviously an important question on the types of assets that you can invest in. Yes, there are. There are I'll preface with this, for anybody that does want to take this route, talk to us. We always like to just have that conversation before to have like the real example rather than just hypothetical. So I'll preface with that. Anytime that somebody wants to make a transaction that they're unsure about, loop us in. We'd love to help qualify that, or tell you, if it's black and white or if it's kind of a gray area. We always like to opt to some professionals on that if it gets into a gray area. However, the easy restrictions are the IRS outlines disqualified persons. The two most common disqualified persons are children and parents and grandparents. So I guess three. They call it your vertical lineage. You don't want to invest your retirement dollars with somebody in your vertical lineage. As far as asset classes go, really there's some random ones. So you can't invest in collectibles. So think, art. You can't do art. You can't do alcoholic beverages. There's another one that's slipping my mind right now, but those aren't most common. I feel like generally speaking, people want to get into real estate in some capacity with a plan like this, and there's not much that's off limits with real estate unless you're trying to use it as your primary residence, which you cannot do. So I'll drop
Plus,
that in there.
you can't rent to your immediate family either, could you?
Good question. You cannot.
That's also arm's length disqualified transaction.
Mhm. Yep, you're right.
Yeah,
And
so
then
don't go buy an apartment or a home or expect that you can rent it to your family because that's a big no-no.
yep, yep. Because that's the thing. If you had an Airbnb with your retirement account, then you couldn't stay there. You wouldn't want family to stay there.
Mhm.
So anyway, we say stay away from that, like you mentioned. And then last one I'll mention here, and Deb, if you have any others, feel free. But can you invest in your own business with your self-directed account? The short answer is no. I will go back to if you have, I'll just share it on the slide here. If you have the solo 401k option, take out a personal loan. You can take out a personal loan from the account, use that $50,000 to put into your business, and then you'll be making payments back to the solo 401k. That's a good way to get liquidity to put into your business. But as far as just investing the retirement account directly into your business, you can't do that. That's referred to as self-dealing, which is disqualified.
Right. Anything
So
that would really directly benefit you is self-dealing, right? So
you're correct. You're exactly right. That's kind of the phrase it's used. Is there a direct benefit here? And
like
if
doing
there
your own
is,
electrical work at your rental, like, yes, that's self-dealing because you're saving money by doing it yourself and you're
yep,
not supposed to do that.
yep. There can be some hoops, but I feel like we've honestly covered just about all of them that I feel like I run into frequently with other members that are asking. So, but anyway, are there any other
Yeah.
questions that you feel we should cover or
Um,
anything?
hmm. Did you cover checkbook control?
I could probably get into that a little bit more just so I'm clear. So, um, that's a
Because
good
I know
point
with
though. So,
I
oh,
know,
sorry.
again, comparing the self-directed IRA to the EQRP, um, owning rentals in a self-directed IRA without checkbook control is really difficult because every time you have an expense, you have to have a repair done or whatever. I would have to actually, use one of my friends and say, hey, can you write out the check to the plumber and I'll have my self-directed custodian pay you back? Because again, you can't
Mhm.
be self-dealing. So I couldn't directly pay the plumber because it's my unit that I'm renting to my tenant, and that was not allowed. So you don't have
Yeah.
that issue. If you have checkbook control, you can just write a check to the plumber because the checkbook is in the name of your self-direct your QRP. So
Mhm.
it's way more streamlined and a lot less steps. And yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
there's pluses and minuses to each, but more so actually, I can't think of any minuses to go to the EQRP, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad
No,
I
that's a
learned
good.
about EQRP because I only knew about self-directed IRA until a few years ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you don't know what you don't know, and then when you know better, you do better, you know?
That's true. Well said. Yeah. Um, and I'm sure I wish for the sake of this slide I had a visual, but that's a great point. So in the self-directed IRA, there's kind of, if I could almost point it out as like four entities. There's you, there's the um, custodian, there's the actual cash, and then there's the deal. And so, like what Deb was saying, you want to move your account, which is, really the checking account, into a deal. So there's a bunch of different hoops you have to jump through, which takes time. Like she was saying, I'd have to have somebody spot me and send the money before the IRA custodian took their 7 to 10 day business day period to process, approve the transaction. Again, just like she was saying, time delays like that for something as simple as plumbing work or electrical work is so monotonous and just frankly just frustrating for a retirement account holder. What the EQRP solo 401k structure does is, so I should back up. On the IRA side, the trust company, so the actual custodian there, holds the checkbook. So they are the ones that actually have control over writing money and moving it out of the account. On the solo 401k side, again, Deb is the trustee. She has the ability to actually write that check. So there's no other middleman, not even us. Nobody at our company has to say, all right, Deb, you're good to go. You can go ahead and sign off. She has that power as the trustee of the account to have direct ownership over the checkbook. Today, if Deb wanted to, she could log into her checking account, see the cash there, invest into a deal. If she had to pay a plumbing expense, she can do that all by herself, on
Mhm.
what's today, Monday. It doesn't have to wait until 7 to 10 business days from now. So that can be really helpful, especially for people that are in a little bit of a time crunch. You've got an opportunity in hand, 3 weeks, I've got to get this thing funded. That can be advantageous for somebody who's in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a good
It's
point.
just very, very convenient, as opposed to doing multiple steps to accomplish the same thing, so
Yep.
very
Yep.
streamlined. And you really don't even need a checkbook. You can just wire funds from your checking account to the
Oh
plumber
yeah.
or whatever, or do an ACH, whatever. It's
Good point.
really, you
Yep.
don't have to fill out forms at all. So, like I said, just the
Mhm.
efficiencies were just a lot better,
Oh
more
yeah. You can even get a
streamlined.
debit card, which is great because it's, it functions like a normal checking account. You can get a debit card and go swipe it if you need to. Um, or plug it into somebody's,
That might be
QuickBooks, and
dangerous.
it could be. It could be. I agree. Um, well, cool. So and Deb, if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them out there. But for next steps, anybody that's listening that wants to learn more, we do complimentary consult calls. Obviously, no fee for that. You can go to wallstreetexitplan.com and book a call, or if you're watching on a computer and you just want to scan that QR code, both take you to the same place. Um, when you book a call, it's going to ask who referred you. Please be sure to put Deb and in her. I think it actually just asks for name. I don't think it'll ask for her email, but just plug in her name so we know. And then that'll be a time where we can get into your situation a little bit, ask questions. What accounts do you have? What are you looking to do? And we can really tailor fit our solution to you, just so you have a
Mhm.
good idea of exactly how it could look for your situation. And so, yeah, don't hesitate to do that if you're interested.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for explaining all this stuff to us, Matthew, because I think EQRP is still one of the kind of hidden gems that people don't know about as another alternative to
Mhm.
putting their retirement funds somewhere. Because I mean, when I grew up, all I was told was put as much as you can in your 401k, and then the Roth 401k came out, and then it was make sure you
Yep.
max that out because it's a lot less than your other one. Those only two vehicles I was ever told about until the last 5-10 years ago. I
Wow.
didn't know about anything else, so you really have to kind of educate yourself or hopefully be around the right people that know more than you do to
Yeah.
learn about all these other strategies,
Absolutely. It's cool you say
so
that because that's one reason why I like doing content like this is just because people just don't know. Like you said, you've been investing for a while, but the self-directed piece has been newer to you over the last 5 or 10 years, and people just aren't aware because it's not talked about. So I love to
mhm.
just put it out there and share. And so I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you
Well,
so
good
much. I
deal.
hope a bunch of people give you a buzz and are interested in setting up a plan.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Deb.
You're welcome.